If you'll just put your name and contact information into the chat, that just helps us know who's on the call and gets to know each other. We are recording today's session. It is used for educational and quality improvement purposes. You can always access the recordings on Canvas or our YouTube page. If you don't wish to be recorded, you can just disconnect from the session. If you've never joined an ECHO session before, please note that it is an interactive community. We want your comments, put your information into chat, ask your questions, come unmute. It's really a great way to learn from each other. If you've never done a case narrative, that's a great way to gain information and knowledge from all of these amazing people on the call. So I'll always do a plug. If you want to do a case narrative about a kiddo that you're working with or a family that you just need some extra help and support, please consider doing a case narrative to us. Please use all protected information. Don't use first or last names. Reach out to a hub member if you are unsure. All of our hub members have an asterisk in front of their name, and they'll be able to answer any questions for you. The key components of an ECHO are always include a didactic speaker, a case presentation and feedback, and then when we're just trying to build up our community and network of professionals, we share our knowledge with each other and gain information from all the people on the call. We've all been on Zoom for a while, so we probably all know how to rename our profile, but in case we don't, it's those three dots up by the top of our name. Change it to your first and last name, your title, or your organization. Again, just so that we can get to know who is on the call. Still trying to build up that professional and personal rapport with each other, even though we're all virtual. Raising your hand, again, you can either just come unmute. Bailey and Kurt help monitor that chat with me. You can come unmute, you can raise your hand, and we'll be sure to answer all those questions. Registering for the sessions just lets you know what's happening. So if you want to do our weekly announcements, you can email earlyecho@aggies.usu.edu. To get our credit for attendance, we do ask that you complete the survey. Thank you to everybody who always completes that survey. It gives us information to share with our funders in order to keep these sessions free and at no charge to others. So we'll be dropping in the survey link throughout the session, and it will also be emailed after the session. Canvas is where we store all past recordings, sessions, case recommendations. So perhaps you were in a case breakout group last month and wanted to know what other people had said. All of those recommendations are on Canvas, so you're always free to go back and look at those. You can also put some information on a discussion board or put a question out there for all the participants to be able to answer. Case studies, again, just a great way to get information from your colleagues, receive feedback, and then take it back to the families we're working with. If you've not done any following us on Facebook or Instagram, please take a minute to do so. We share information about all of the ECHO sessions, resources that are shared with us from our hub team or from other participants. So it's a great way to just gain more resources. I am thrilled today to introduce Kassidy Reinert. I always say her name last name wrong, so I apologize, Kassidy. She is a project coordinator from the CERT program, and I'm thrilled for her to share with us today about some sleep studies. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Kassidy take it away.
All right, can you guys see my screen all right then?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just try advancing and make sure that it's working. Nope. Okay, great. Can you guys see the whole screen or can you only see part of it?
We can see the whole screen.
Okay, great. It's showing something weird on my screen. So great. Okay. I'm so excited to be here today and to talk to you about sleep. So I definitely don't feel like an expert on sleep, but I've helped a lot of families teach their children how to have better sleep habits. And I have 2 children of my own. So I feel like I've been through some of the trenches as well. Sleep is a really important thing, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot. Is I'm going to do a little intro, give you some information about me. I, like Janelle was saying, would love for you guys to use the chat as much as you would like. I'm going to give you guys some info, just some data on sleep. I think it's good to have that like relevant information about why sleep is important. We all know, but I think being able to take that back to the families and say, this is why it's so important for this really difficult skill to be developed with your child. And then I'm going to show you some of my favorite tools that I use with families and that I have used personally in my home as well. So let's get to know each other. My name is Kassidy. And like Janelle said, I'm the clinical director at ASSERT. It's a program at USU for preschool age students who have a diagnosis of autism. I've been in the field for about 17 years, which is crazy. It seems like it hasn't been that long. And I've worked in lots of different settings. I've been at the clinical setting at USU. We do a lot of parent involvement. Part of being involved in ASSERT, parents agree that they will visit ASSERT for 2 hours a month and that we will be in their home for at least 2 hours a month. So lots of interaction there. And then I've also worked in school districts in my home state of Wyoming and in Utah as well. So I wanted to also tell you a little bit about why I got into this field. My nephew Sai was diagnosed with autism 20-ish years ago, 21 years ago. He's 23. And it's been quite the adventure to sit alongside him and my sister on all of these different skills and different trials that they've both been through. Last weekend, ASSERT got to celebrate their 20th anniversary, which was really fun to be at. And he and my sister actually attended, and some of the families that I've worked with got to meet him. And it was just this really great full circle opportunity to say, oh, this is the amazing man that set me on this path, and got to be involved in these wonderful families' lives as well. And like I said, I have 2 kids of my own. That's the only picture I had on my computer, so I thought I'd add something fun to look at. All right, so in the chat, I would love to know like what your position is or your role or your job in working with families. Let me turn on the chat real fast. Cool. Early interventionist. All right, so lots of variety. I love it. SLP, love me some SLPs. We have a really awesome collaboration with the USU SLP program here, and it's been so helpful. Vision specialists, developmental specialists, awesome. So many different varieties of interventionists and RN. Cool. Okay, great. This gives me lots of kind of perspective on what we're going to talk about today. So I had this really cool way to have some polls pop up in this today, but unfortunately they only let me do like 2 slides. So ignore this and just use the chat. I would love to know where you guys are joining from as well. St. George. So you can just do that in the regular chat. Price, Logan, cool. Heber, Kaysville, lots of Utah people, love it. Cool. Thank you for sharing. All right, so like I said, I really want to talk about data on sleep. So here's some statistics, and I've seen a wide range of statistics, but sleep problems are a really common skill deficit for children and youth, whether they are typically developing or have a diagnosis of developmental delays. Typically developing children, it's about 35 to 50%. And then you look at our individuals with autism and other developmental delays, and it jumps up to nearly 80%, which is pretty impactful when you think about how little sleep some families are able to get. and how little sleep those kiddos are also getting, or young adults even, that are receiving services. So sorry, I have to keep jumping between screens. Okay. There's lots of things that can negatively impact or be negatively impacted because of lack of sleep. Can be injuries that can occur. I have definitely experienced this with my 2-year-old who decided to start being able to climb out of her crib the other night. She was perched on the corner of it like a gargoyle. And I could definitely see how some of those injuries happen, right? Like, oh, you're now big enough that we need to take the rail off, right? There's lots of things that are happening in those rooms at night. And if you don't have a baby monitor in there, yeah, there could be some dangerous situations happening. Things like challenging behavior, poor physical health, poor academic behavior or performances. There can be increases in self-injury. By the opposite of this, I've seen a lot of times, even just anecdotally, watching students at a cert, once we've worked on sleep at home and everybody in the house is getting more sleep, we see a giant decrease in that challenging behavior because, when I don't have enough sleep, I'm not very nice either. And I'm really grumpy and I might not handle things as well as I typically do if I have great sleep. Some other negative impacts that can happen are on the family. If mom and dad are not getting great sleep, their daytime functioning might not be awesome. There's also a strong correlation between that and maternal depression. And then add in having a child with a disability, that is also likely to increase that as well. So maternal depression and anxiety can increase with both of those. And then also marital discord. So we've all seen the statistics about divorce in families that have a child with a diagnosis, and this can also impact that too. So I just thought all of these numbers and all of this data was really interesting and, put some power behind why we want to focus on sleep. So why is it important? Some of those opposite things. So if we're not getting good sleep that's restoring us, especially as a little child, we're more irritable, we are getting more fatigued, and we have a more difficult time following instructions. So just more data to prove that, yes, this is important to talk about. So a lot of times when we talk about sleep problems, we can talk about either sleep problems or more intense sleep issues. And we'll get to those in a minute, but sleep problems are really what I'm going to be talking about today, because I'm not a medical professional. I can't diagnose sleep apnea and all those types of things, which we'll talk about in a minute, but here's what we're really talking about. So nighttime routine noncompliance, where we're having a difficult time getting through those steps of brushing teeth and getting into the bed and all of those things. Other interfering behaviors, delayed sleep onset, night awakenings, early awakenings, and then night terrors are also another thing, which are very different than nightmares. And please, if you guys have any questions, like Janelle said, just unmute or chat or whatever. So getting help with sleep, a lot of times families are reaching out to their pediatricians most often. And most of them are looking for that magic cure, right? Like they want the melatonin, they want something quick to help take care of it. And like I said, I'm not a doctor, so I can't recommend any of those things. But there are definitely times that you should recommend a family get in contact with their doctor when we have some suspicions that it might be more of a sleep disorder than just sleep troubles. So if we notice things like breathing issues and snoring, excessive movements while sleeping, excessive sweating, and sleepwalking, those can all be signs that there's something else going on, and that a pediatrician could help recommend the right direction to go in. That's one of my biggest things as a BCBA is I always want to rule out medical first, because I don't want to be fighting all these other things and realizing, oh my gosh, I'm like teaching this kid to ignore this feeling, or teaching them to, not take care of this physiological need that's happening. So definitely rule out something medical before we're jumping into some of these other things. The way that I really love to look at sleep is that it is a skill. And a lot of times we don't think of it that way because, what is one of the first few things that we can do when we're born? Sleep, right? It should be something that just comes innately. I feel like this is something that also correlates really highly to eating too, right? A lot of times when families haven't been in this world that most of us are involved in, they're thinking about how sleeping and eating just come naturally, right? My daughter actually just went through some feeding therapy because at 2 years old, I started noticing that she wasn't eating really great. She would try to eat foods, and I'm like, this doesn't seem behavioral. I need to get this checked out. So we went to a lovely speech therapist, and she did some feeding, and it was magic because my daughter didn't know how to use her tongue. And it's something that she probably wasn't doing great from the time she was tiny. And so sometimes these things are things that we can either just grin and bear it as parents, and especially those that are dealing with a lot of other challenges with challenging behavior, communication. Maybe sleep is the back burner. Maybe it's I give them the iPad and I'm going to head to bed because that's what we can do right now. So I really love thinking about it as a skill, and it's influenced by lots of things. So the history and the environment that they're sleeping in, and then also cultural practices. I think that's really important too, is looking at that family unit and that family culture and identifying, like, are there things in that culture that I need to be aware of so that I'm being culturally not competent, because I can never be competent, but like culturally understanding and not making assumptions about how a family, my nephew is Tongan. So thinking about like their cultural practices, I might need to identify some of those before I'm giving recommendations. All right. The other thing that I love about thinking about sleep as a skill is it's really hopeful. It's a hopeful understanding of sleep. It means that we can change this, and that the behavior that the parents are engaging in and that the child is engaging in can both be changed. And if we're thinking about it as a skill deficit, we can be addressing it by understanding what is controlling different variables and then teaching those skills that both the parent and child need. I think I was looking at your guys' past schedule, and it was looking at was it challenging behavior recently? Reinforcement, something.
Yeah, we just had behaviors, the ABCs of behaviors the last 2 months.
Yeah. So thinking about some of that, like antecedents and then those consequences, looking at all of those things, they're still relevant to sleep. Like what are these setting events that we're setting up for this child? And then what are the consequences when they're getting out of bed and getting all of this extra attention or getting all of this access to preferred items? And I think we can change a lot of views about sleep if we think about it as a skill. So when we're starting to think about this, like developing sleep goals, a lot of the families that I've worked with have just been so overwhelmed that they don't know where to start or what they could even hope for. And most of it is like, I just need them to sleep. And so how can we help? I would love for you guys to throw in the comments, like, what are some characteristics that you would qualify as good sleep? Like, what are things that would make a family feel like their child is getting good sleep? Go to bed on time, yes. Number of hours, staying in the room, sleep through the night, yes. Falling asleep within 15 minutes. Yes, I heard a statistic the other day too that was like, if you fall asleep in under 5 minutes, it means that you aren't getting enough sleep all the time. Like, oh, wow, I can fall asleep really quick. I'm probably not getting enough sleep. Being able to continue to sleep, yes. Quiet background, yes, all of those. Yeah, so there's lots of things that we could say are characteristics of good sleep, and there's lots of information out there, but I think really chopping it down to those like smaller subcategories that you guys were saying too, like they're going to sleep, or they're going to bed, they're going to sleep and getting good amounts of sleep, and then they're staying in their bed as well. All right. Something else that I think is really interesting is how few people understand how much sleep kids should be getting at different ages. I have neighbors that have like 6-year-olds and 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and they're like, yeah, our kids go to bed at 7 and they don't get up till 7:30. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of time to be in their room. Like that might be more than they actually need. So everybody's different and every child is different, and certain diagnoses as well can affect how much sleep is needed. But these are some general recommendations of amount of sleep. And I thought for especially those younger ones, it's helpful to see like amount of time of day sleep versus night sleep. So looking at those naps versus daytime sleep, or nighttime sleep. So just some more data to have in your toolbox as well. All right. So back to what I was talking about before. So sleep is a skill, which means that it's something that can be motivated and something also that can be reinforced, which I think is really exciting too. So what are some things that can decrease the value of sleep? Obviously, having sleep in funky patterns. So I know a lot of the kiddos that I work with they're sleeping in little tiny chunks throughout the day. So they're getting cat naps often throughout the day, but not necessarily going to bed, sleeping in their bed, and then having a nap. So there can definitely be concerns with having too much sleep the previous night. Oh, I see a comment about that.
Yeah,
When should
I
we
was
be
just gonna
concerned? Yeah, the kid is getting too much sleep, and how many hours is too much? That's a great question. I would say if it's outside of, so going back to this little like averages, I would say if there's multiple hours above that or multiple hours below that, I think that's probably going to be a concern. And I'll show you some information later about how I have families log that info. And that's something too that they could bring to their pediatrician. But I think if they're getting like 16 hours of sleep and it's recommended that they're getting like 10 hours of sleep, that's probably a concern. And I wonder if you're seeing some of that pattern of like, I'm getting 16 hours of sleep one night and then I'm getting like 4 hours of sleep the next night, and just kind of that funky pattern that keeps going on and on. But yeah, really good question. But yeah, there can definitely be times when you're getting too much sleep. I think there's this really cool thing called the forbidden zone. And it's trying to put a kid to bed in that time period that's 2 to 3 hours before they're actually in that like I'm getting tired phase, which I've definitely tried to do that as a mother. And I'm like, wow, that was a nightmare for both of us. And then avoiding things like caffeine before bed. I've seen like between like 4 and 6 hours before bed. Trying not to wind them up, which is often the time that my husband really likes to wind them up, is right before bed. And then trying to not have reinforcers available after it's time for them to go to sleep. So I've like things that I've commonly seen is like leaving an iPad in the room or leaving television on or things like that in their room. And then also there's looking at that like more social reinforcement of parents being around or interactions or affection, which is really hard. Like I am not the person that's really great at sleep training. So I think that's a little bit different conversation. So like sleep training to me was really hard because I was not raised in a house that put me to bed and I was in bed the whole night, right? Like I had a mom that did not create great sleep habits. So I'm trying to like reverse some of that too, but I think there's a difference between kindness and like reinforcing these crummy behaviors, right? Like we can be kind and loving and teach our families how to like put their child to sleep in a positive environment without screaming and crying and all that kind of stuff versus like, I'm just going to be cold all evening. So, and then definitely temperature and light and all of that can definitely change things as well. All right. So now I'm going to show you some of my very favorite tools. So I have 2 researchers, PhDs that I've really loved learning about. I actually checked with Dr. Higbee as well as like, do you have any other information that, that you really love about sleep? And he's like, no, those are pretty much the best. There's not a lot of changes in sleep research in the last few years. So Dr. Pat Fryman is awesome. If you guys ever want to like listen to a behavior analyst who is just really kind and compassionate and understanding and really takes into account like family circumstances and stuff, he's awesome. He's also super charismatic. As you can see in his picture, he wears sunglasses inside. He's just a really cool guy. So yeah, he's a fantastic person to look up. He has a really great presentation about a mom and not understanding the circumstances that she was in. And I don't know, it's just really powerful stuff. I love the way that he talks about helping families. So he wrote a book and it's pretty old. It's not super recent. It is called Good Night, Sweet Dreams. I love you. Now get into bed and go to sleep. And I have used it with a lot of families. It's great for clinicians to read. It's really short and concise, but really kind of a fun read too. And it's a great book. So I'm going to share with you a few little tidbits that are in it. And then if you guys have any other questions about it, I'm happy to share as well. So it talks about how there's lots of benefits to sleep. It really sets it up nicely in those first few chapters about like why sleep is important. It talks about how kids replenish their energy and it can help them learn how to handle distress better. It learns how to help them, or it helps them learn how to follow instructions. And it also can help parents use appropriate discipline. So they're matching like the why of the behavior instead of just like getting frustrated and angry about why this kid isn't going to sleep. So if it's this kid is trying to get attention, they're able to like limit the attention as they're putting them back to bed, that kind of stuff. And the parents get that break, right? Like they get to replenish their own needs and get some rest and maybe some relaxation in there as well. I lost my mouse for a second. Okay. He also focuses a lot on how important it is to create that pre-bedtime ritual and routine. There are lots of people who are like, I am really into schedule and I'm really into routines. And I think sometimes those can be different. Pat, did you have a question? No, you're good. Okay. So I am definitely a person of routine. Like my kids don't go to bed at the exact same time every single night, but it's within a short window, right? Like we're talking about within a half hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Like last night, obviously it was the 4th of July. So everything was way off time, right? But our routine is the same. So we get ready for bed the same way. We have the same situations that we're going through. We're reading the same number of books, all that kind of stuff. And he talks about how it's really important to set that up. And that's really where you're showing your child how loved they are and how important it is that like they can trust you and that you're setting them up. And the way he describes it is like you're setting them up for their journey through the night alone, so that they're set up in a positive way instead of being scared. And then it also talks about like really practical steps. So like winding down, making sure that like they're getting into that relaxed state, that they're sleepy, but they're still awake. And then talking about that ritual length too. So how long is that pre-bedtime ritual? Is it a 10-minute thing? If it's getting up to like 45 minutes, an hour, we're creating a really long set of steps that might be really difficult to recreate if we have a babysitter or if we have grandma over or things like that. So I really enjoy the way he writes in this book too, because it's not condescending, it's not unkind, it's saying like, yes, this is a really hard thing, but here's some great ways to help. All right, and then he also talks a lot in here about a bedtime pass. So this is an age appropriate thing for, I would say, kids about 3 years old. I've used it for some of my clients at Assert. And basically what it is, and I have like a little document that I'll share with you guys about it as well. But the bedtime pass is basically a way to teach a kid that, like, yes, you can still come out of your room and get something that you need, or come get me if you need something, but it means that like you have to basically use them sparingly. So I've taught it where we have multiple bedtime passes and then cut that back. And there's a whole step-by-step process, and it talks about how this is in here, but it really gives that kid the opportunity to say, like, do I really need something? And if I don't, I'm going to wait and use this when I really need it, which is really interesting because I've used it with some kids who don't have a super expansive like vocal verbal repertoire either. And some kids learn how to use it really quickly. And it's a nice way to teach them that, like, yes, you can still get what you need, but you shouldn't be coming out of your room every 2 seconds to ask for the iPad, because you're not going to get the iPad. If you need a drink of water, or if you need mom to come tuck you back in or things like that, yes, you can have it once in a while. So bedtime pass is a fun thing. I'll show you more about that. I have a document I'll pull up in a little bit. So some other great materials that I've used. Greg Hanley is also a really kind and compassionate behavior analyst, which I love. And he has some really awesome assessment tools. And all of these are like readily accessible on the internet too. I wanted to make sure that these are things that like I could share, and it was easy for you guys to find them again and share them again if you needed to. So he has some really helpful assessment tools. And it's been really fun to use them with families, because a lot of times the questions actually lead parents to identifying where their deficits are as parents and what skills they need to work on. They're like, oh, I didn't even realize that that's what I'm doing. And it really like just going through that process of identifying what are the steps that are really important to setting up a good bedtime routine and good sleep habits. It's really fun to watch them like self-identify. So you guys have probably seen some things like this before. I really like them. It's just a good way to identify like what are some sleep habits and like things that are helping or hindering your child's sleep habits. So it just goes through like lighting, exercise, caffeine, all that kind of stuff that we've already touched a little bit on. So this is one that I use sometimes just to get an idea of like, oh, yeah, okay, let's just start at this level to get an idea of what's going on with sleep before I'm going to go through a larger assessment with the family. All right, so this is another great document. I'm actually going to pull it up if I can. The other screen. So this document is really helpful. Can you guys see that now?
Yep, we
Okay,
can.
great. So it goes through basically the majority of the day and sleep. So it talks about like during the day, what are things that we can do to help set our kids up for success? If they're over 4, we're going to try and avoid napping, especially after 3. And then we're going to try to reserve bed for sleeping, not for playing. And then the hours prior to putting your child to bed, here's some ideas. Like we talked about, establishing a nighttime routine is really helpful. And then when to go to bed and get out of bed. I've also had some families that have used things like those okay to wake clocks. Have you ever seen what those look like? So basically like it has one color, or like sometimes it'll be like a sunshine. If it's okay for the kid to get out of bed, it's basically a way to do like signal training. So it has like if it's blue, it means it's nighttime and they're not supposed to get out of bed. And if it's green, it means, yeah, it's fine for you to get up. It's fine to be awake at this point. So sometimes we have taught kids to use additional cues in their day and in their routine so that they identify like, oh, now is not time to be awake. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And then considerations while in bed. I think this one's a really important one, is like optimizing sleep dependency. So a lot of kids have like their favorite things, right? They have to have like, sometimes when they're really tiny, they have a binky or they have a blanket or different things. And here he talks about how it's really important to identify things that actually don't need to be reset or found in the night. So if a kid loses their pacifier, you're going back in and getting that social attention sometimes, and you're giving like having to find this thing, and it can create distress for the child and for you and all this stuff. So having things that are easy to read, like that are like just constantly there and that don't require you to like have to interrupt the child in like going back to sleep, or things that are able to transport easily. So he talks about using like a white noise machine. I haven't ever used one, but I've heard families that absolutely love them and swear by them, and they have like, it's one that they can take with them anywhere. So if they go on a trip, they have it with them. And I thought that was really awesome that it's thinking about how to make those connections with things, but having it be something that isn't going to get lost or misplaced. And then, so here's some other things about parent insomnia too, which is helpful too. So like how to make sure that the parents are getting good sleep, and what are things that you can do, like not looking at your phone right before bed and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is a nice document to be able to share too. It's really practical, it's really helpful, and it just gives you some good ideas of like, oh, hey, here's some things that are probably affecting your sleep and not the direction that you're hoping to make sleep go. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about that document?
Hey, Kassidy,
There is
sorry, I was
Go
just gonna
ahead.
say there's something in the chat.
Yeah.
She says, what was the single page assessment or questionnaire you had up right before this last one?
Oh yeah, let me go back to that. It's just called the Family Inventory of Sleep Habits, and this will be in the slides. There's one that I found online that's even longer now. I think it's been adjusted and it's got more questions in it. So if you just Google that, it will come up too. Good question. Okay. Any other questions right now? Not yet. Okay. All right. So this document.
Cassidy, sorry
Yeah.
to bug you again. There's another one. You know,
Do
a
you have a similar
similar assessment in Spanish.
Oh, I haven't had experience with that. I don't know for sure if there is. I'm sure there are out there. I don't know about this next one either. I know that Greg Hanley does a lot of stuff in Italy, so I know it's in Italian, but I'm not sure if it's in Spanish yet, but I could definitely reach out and find out about that too. Good question. Okay, I'm going to pull up the whole assessment actually here so we can kind of walk through it. So nope, that's not what
And Cassidy, I did put this one in chat, so that one of the links that is in chat, I put this assessment I found, was able to find that one for
Perfect.
participants if they want to pull that up.
Perfect. Okay. Let me try and fix this. Oh, the joys of Zoom, right? What a great tool. I don't know why that one's not coming up. There we go. Thanks for being patient with me. All right, so this is an awesome assessment that really goes through step by step, looking at what the sleep problems are. It talks about like, is your child actually taking medication right now? Identifying like, has this been something that's been occurring for a long time? Unfortunately, most of the statistics say that if a individual, especially with autism, has sleep issues or sleep problems, it's not going to get any better, and it's going to continue to get worse if there's not some intervention put in place, which I think is even more motivating for me as an early interventionist to work on this now, to make sure that this is something that is getting addressed instead of just pushed down the line. I think it's really awesome that it also involves sleep goals. Like I said earlier, I think it's hard sometimes for families to identify these. So I like that it has some examples of ideas of what they could involve in those goals. And then it goes through what are the specific problems. And basically, if you mark yes, then it tells you what to include detail-wise. Sleep interfering behaviors, it goes through delayed sleep onset. So you can see how some of those things that we talked about at the beginning that are those sleep problems, it goes through each one of these, so you can really help the family identify what's going on. Night awakenings, early awakenings, sleep schedule, which I think can really help us identify like how to proceed. And then it talks about how, like, where do we start? Like, what is our goal at the end of treatment versus the beginning? Oh, I'm not sure what happened. Okay, sleep interfering behaviors. And then down at the bottom, it talks about like the schedule, like what is our plan going forward? Because sometimes when you're starting these sleep schedules, if the kid is going to bed at midnight every night, you're not going to be like, okay, we're going to put them to bed at 9 o'clock. That's feasibly never going to happen for the child or the family. And I feel like that's when parents get really frustrated, right? Is when we're jumping all the way when this kid is like, I'm not tired until 11:45. That's not going to happen. So you might take small incremental steps backwards and say, all right, the first night we're going to go to bed at 11:45. The next night we're going to go to bed at 11:30, and slowly inch it back so that there's easy steps of like, this is exactly what our plan is. And that also might involve, we're going to be waking the kid up earlier typically than we would have, so that they're making sure that we're getting like just enough sleep, but that we're still tired that night before or the night after. So we're going to sleep the next night. And then I think this is really helpful too, to look at like early awakenings, confusional arousal, and nightmares. I definitely have had kids who have had like those night terrors, and they wake up screaming and then they're instantly back asleep, but the parents are coming in and intervening and trying to comfort them when the kid's like, I have no idea where I even am right now, and you just woke me up more than just letting me cry through it for a minute, and I go back to sleep. So I think these are really helpful things too to look at, like, is your child hungry if they're waking up in the middle of the night? Like maybe they're not getting enough food and that's why they're waking up in the middle of the night. Or maybe we find out some other information. Like one time I had a kiddo who was just about ready to graduate from the ASSERT program. They had made tons of progress. They were working in all sorts of different academic skills, and I found out that he was still sleeping in a crib and drinking a bottle before bed, and he wasn't eating much of a dinner. And so I was like, oh yeah, this makes lots of sense. Cool, let's work on these other things. So maybe we can also address this sleep issue too, because if I'm not having a full belly, that I'm like not too full, but like I'm full enough that when I go to bed, I'm not waking up hungry in the middle of the night because I'm not having a bottle. So we worked on some of those other things, and guess what? Sleep then was able to occur a lot less stressful for everyone that was involved. So, and then it has some like, if these things are happening, here's some tips and tricks for that as well. So it doesn't just give you an assessment, it also gives you some actual help in there as well. And then here's some like just general, like helping to build compliance throughout their day so that bedtime routines can go better too. So that one's really long, but I found it really helpful to walk through with families and get a better idea of what we're actually going to be working on with sleep, because there's so many different skills and deficits that could be occurring with sleep that we want to make sure that we're addressing the right part of sleep. Okay, and then we'll pull the next one up. It's a pretty simple one. So this is an example. I went to a talk by Greg Hanley quite a few years ago, and he talked about how just creating a simple sleep log and having parents fill that out can be really helpful, and it can be way less effortful for both of you to get a good idea of like what's actually going on, you know, like what time you're putting the kid to bed, what time they fell asleep, how long were they awake for if they woke up in the middle of the night, and then describe what happened during that awake time, like if they're waking up and if they're, you know, getting to play on the iPad in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's probably like, I find it reinforcing when I wake up in the middle of the night and get to scroll on my phone. And then I'm like, oh, I did not do what I should have done. I should not have looked at my phone. It's going to be harder for me to go back to sleep. And then looking at like when they woke up in the morning, and then if the child had a nap. So something simple like this can give you an idea of where to start too. If we're looking at, oh, this kid is basically taking cat naps all throughout the night, that's going to look like a very different intervention than like my kiddo who was having a bottle and who was, you know, waking up hungry in the middle of the night. So those are some of my practical like tips and tricks. I think sleep is a really emotional thing too. And like I said earlier, taking into account the context and the culture of the family too. Like, you could have told my mom to use the Ferber method. Well, it's a great method and it works really well. She never was going to use that no matter what, because that's not who she is and that's not what she's going to be able to implement. So I think taking into account, like, what are the parents able and willing to do? Because if we're asking them to do things that are outside of their comfort zone, it's not going to happen. So we need to adjust as clinicians and say, okay, how can we build a system that's going to work for you and your child so you're getting good sleep? And, you know, it's going to be effective. We don't want to make this, make parents make a lot of effort and then have it be really punishing and it not work for their child. So do you guys have any questions? I wanted to leave some time on here too, to talk about like real world experiences or things that you have questions about. Like I said, I'm definitely not like the end all be expert of sleep, but I do feel like having a large range of things in your toolkit to be able to help families with and identify what is the actual skill deficit that the child has or that the parents have. Yeah, I think being able to say you're not being mean by taking your kid and putting them back into bed when they're crying, things like that. Like it totally depends on the context. So it's really hard to say like, this is how you treat sleep, right? Because there's so many variables involved in it. So I'd love for you guys to like unmute and talk about sleep or say, hey, here's some questions that I have, and we can discuss as a group too.
Kassidy, this is Janelle. I
Yeah.
loved your thought of just saying that sleep is a skill and we're getting you on the journey to sleep alone. Like I've never thought about it that way and presented it to parents that way. So I loved that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. It makes, I don't know, as a mom, it made me feel a lot better about it too. Cause I'm like in the back of my head, I'm like my mom, right? That's like, oh no, like I can't make my kid cry and be sad in their bed alone. And now I'm a behavior analyst too. It's like being on both sides. So I'm like, no, I'm teaching my kid a skill. It's okay, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So Pat commented about like physiological reasons too. So reflux and constipation, sleep apnea, seizures. Yeah, there is so many other things. Like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, like there's things we can't ignore as clinicians. We have to make sure that those things are being addressed because that's not in my wheelhouse. I don't know how to treat those things because I'm not a doctor. I'm not this person's specialist, right? So making sure that we have the whole picture is really important. Pat, do you have any like comments to add about that?
No comments, except that's my entire caseload. I swear sometime. These kids don't sleep. They come home from the NICU and they sleep on the mother. So
Right.
there's a lot of ingrained habits that start. And, you know, you were saying something about, I don't know what the Ferber method is, but parents aren't going to do something if it doesn't solve the problem or if it doesn't feel right.
Right. Right.
And so putting your baby back to sleep while they're puking all over the place doesn't feel right.
Right. And being able to take into account, like, let me help you give you a menu of options and ways that we can do this, and saying, yeah, we need to make sure that we're getting all of this. Cause I like, is it SD? Just commented about like how it's so important to just brain development in general. Like sleep is such an important and powerful thing. We have to make sure it's happening. But if it's not easy for parents, like, yeah, I had a baby with reflux and putting her on my chest and sleeping on the couch was dangerous. And guess what? There was nights I did it because she would sleep and I got to sleep for more than an hour a night. And it's like, we, like everyone else, like I view the world as a behavior analyst, and I view it as like reinforcement and punishment, right? Like my behavior was reinforced because my baby slept, you know, like it was easier for me. And like having those chronic things that this child has for a long period of time, there's going to be habits that are developed even after maybe some of these other things are resolved. That now I have a 3-year-old, well, she's not 3 and it's not my child, but like you might have this child that's now 3 and will only sleep on mom because that's where it was comfortable for both of them. And that's how they both got sleep. Yeah. I love all these things.
And then it looks like Audrey has her hand up, Kassidy.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Just 2 things with my own personal child. That when she was about 8 months old, she stopped sleeping well and fuss and fuss and fuss. And for 2 different nights, I unzip. I'm checking everything and unzip her jammies, and immediately her hand went to her belly button, which is kind of an outie belly button, and she calmed right down. And the second time it happened, and I'm like, "What is this? You want to hold your belly button?" And that day I put little slits in the side of her jammies and she slept through the night wonderfully for ages, because that's when I started noticing, even during the day, to comfort herself, she would feel her belly button.
Yeah.
So just being really acutely aware of what calms them and then following through and making that possible. So she had little holes in each of her jammies so she could feel her belly button, because that was more important to get the sleep than it was to care about that. And then the second one was she then developed night terrors as a 2.5 or 3-year-old. And or at least I thought they might be night terrors and just wake up screaming and you couldn't wake her up, you couldn't calm her or anything. I'd finally realized that I'd carry her to the potty and sit her on it and she would just deflate as she peed. And then and she stopped crying, put her right back to bed. She was asleep, didn't remember a thing the next day. So
Yeah.
something in that neurological system was going, I need to pee, I need to pee. And then she just relaxed right into it. So those are two sort of physiological things to keep in mind or watch for what is the root cause of the problem.
Right. I think those are both wonderful ideas, and it makes me think about like our neurodiverse populations that we work with, right? And thinking about like what are things that they find calming or overstimulating that we might not, like maybe that sound machine that we're putting in this child's room is actually super overstimulating to them and can be really aversive, or like what is something that's actually calming to them, and like maybe it's the type of clothing that they're wearing is overstimulating and can be aversive to them. So it's making it difficult for them to sleep. I love that idea of just like putting a little slit in her jammies, like what a simple but elegant and wonderful way to help fix this, this issue that, oh, look, we can both get what we need in life right now. Yeah.
Well, Kassidy, I love all the tips and tools that you gave us today. And I'll just leave it open one more minute for any questions or comments before we turn it over to our case presenter.
Oh, I saw that Susan commented about like having like a special toy, a transitional toy in bed is safe and can be soothing for a child. And she just put comments on there. So yeah, I think that's like my son and my daughter are really interesting. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I forgot to add on that was that it's not till after the first year of life that, pediatricians say that you can have the soft, lovey toy in the bed because, nothing can be in the bed. But if it's a typical child after 1, they can have their little snuggly toy or their blankie in the bed with them. Is that something that you speak to a lot and helping the child create a transitional object to promote a sense of comfort as they make that, and as the topic suggests, as they make that move from the present world with someone with them to the next world of being by yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it's going into your bedroom or walking from the house into the car. But when there's a change, a transitional object can be really comforting for them to carry.
For sure. That's definitely true. It's funny, my daughter and my son, like my son is obsessed with Hot Wheels and literally every night he picks one and sets it by him, like on his nightstand every single night. And my daughter loves stuffed animals, but she doesn't have like one that's like her favorite, like transitional toy, right? Like, but like every time we're going to the car, she picks one and he picks a Hot Wheels to take to the car. And she recently found his old like stick horse that's like, it's soft, it's not hard, but that was something that she's been wanting to like fall asleep with at nap time, and just different things like that. Like, yeah. And I think it's totally fine. I think sometimes kids get so dependent on them that if it's ever lost or it's ever dropped out of the bed or things like that, I think that's what that kind of was talking about, is more maybe use caution when establishing it and make sure it's something that you can find again easily, or that they're not going to lose in their sleep or things like that, as they're, like you said, as it's safe at the age where they're able to have something with them when they're sleeping. But yeah,
if they are an older child and using that transitional object, it can be an opportunity to work on grief and repair.
Oh yeah, that's a great
It's
idea.
an initial step into that world if they've lost a toy and you can't get another one.
Yeah.
And it comes, for most children, it can come before a pet dying. But it's that step into that world of loss and grief, and for them sometimes panic.
Yeah, that's great.
If like you said, if they're younger and it creates such a issue that you're spending their whole night trying to find it, and that's another thing, but
Yeah,
something to consider.
Yeah, well, great. Well, thank you guys very much. I am going to turn the time over to Shelby and Kate, who are going to be presenting our case for us today. All of the information that Kassidy shared will be sent to us in a follow-up email as well as put on Canvas. So Kassidy, thank you so much for your time today. And then Kate and Shelby, if you guys want to take it over.
Thanks so much for letting me come today.
I'm muted. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, so just pretend I am Kate. She's driving.
Sorry, I'm driving.
She's on her way, driving on her way back to town. So I will just kind of go through this. Oh boy. Okay, so this little guy is 29 months old. He has an autism level 1 diagnosis. He also has been diagnosed with chromosome trisomy 8 and has pretty significant insomnia. He receives early intervention services in person in the home since 10 months of age. He has had occupational therapy consults, I'm assuming monthly from 10 months till now, physical therapy consults monthly from 10 to 15 months, and then now have back down to every other month from, I guess, 16 to 21. So I don't think he receives any physical therapy consults now.
Nope.
And then speech consults quarterly from 10 to 15 months, and now monthly since he was been 16 months old. He also receives outpatient speech weekly, used to receive weekly OT, but then discontinued in March due to scheduling issues. Global delays noted at his 20-month evaluation, diagnosed with autism at 22 months, diagnosed with the chromosome trisomy 8 at 28 months. Insomnia diagnosis on June discharge papers, where he was hospitalized for pneumonia, I believe.
Yep.
He receives weekly iron infusions and doesn't sleep well. Their primary concern is for their little guy to have a consistent daily and nightly routine. They are hoping he will put himself, or he does put himself down for a nap if he's overly tired. Sleeps in his parents' bed, needs a parent to be touching or near him for him to fall asleep. They would like to transition him to his own room while his older brother is gone for the summer, but due to illness, they have not been successful. Here are his IFSP goals. Have a consistent daily and nightly routine, use words and phrases to communicate, follow simple one-step directions, and respond to his name, dress himself, undress himself, and then we've got a transition goal for preschool. Some barriers, he receives weekly iron infusions, he needs a lot of sensory input throughout his day, and the sleep medication he is currently taking right now, cyproheptadine, 2 milligrams, taken at bedtime. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. This medication causes a lot of energy and hunger. And parents also give 0.5 milligram of melatonin at bedtime. Was there a question?
It looks like somebody is just not muted.
Okay. Let's see, additional info. They've tried many ways to get him to sleep. White noise machine, essential oils, lavender baths, weighted blankets, overfeeding with carbs, a weighted stuffy with essential oils, exercising before bedtime, strict routine, but he's not necessarily cooperative. He will currently take a random object to bed with him, fork, spatula, solar light from outside. A sensory profile was completed around 14 months of age. He was low registration, sensory sensitive, sensory avoidant, and low threshold, more than others. Has difficulty processing auditory and vestibular sensory input, more than his same age peers. Yeah, so we've had limited success with simple sign language. We've tried providing choices, a PEX board, hand over hand with signs. They're working on responding to yes, no questions, following simple commands, put in, put on, clean up, and then turn taking with verbal prompts. Family culture, white, middle class, part-time working mom and dad, 13-year-old half brother, extended family for emotional support, but not local. They have a good social network of friends. Mom and dad both work in the medical field. Dad is a flight paramedic. Mom is an EKG technician. And then suggestions for strategies, interventions, or other approaches. I think we had kind of settled on ways to get him to sleep without a parent needing to be touching him, how to get him to sleep in his own room, and then how to get him to stay asleep without medication. We're kind of the big.
Okay, we're
big,
gonna go ahead and get put into groups. So Kirsten and Crystal, you guys are going to be leading group number 1, which is how to get him to sleep without being touched by parents. Kate and Shelby, you guys are going to be in group number 2, which is how to get him to sleep in his own room at nap time and bedtime. And then Pat and Sue, you guys are going to be leading group number 3, which is how to get him to stay asleep without types of medication or melatonin. And so we'll be switching Shelby and Kate between the rooms so you guys can ask other questions. So Bailey, you could go ahead and break us into breakout groups.
Open, so you should see that invitation to accept.
So welcome back, everybody. As we're just waiting for all the breakout rooms to close, if you'll just all take a minute and complete the survey link. We do have some time today to have each of the breakout groups give one idea. So I am going to go start with Pat's group. Pat and Sue, who would like to talk from your group?
Pat's got the notes.
Okay, so Pat,
So
if
you
you'll
can remember all of them. Well, there was a lot of good suggestions because ours was, how do you keep the kid out? How do you allow him to stay asleep? And one of I thought the best suggestions was to do a checklist of all the items that you want to, work on, and then remove one at a time and see what works. So a lot of the talk was around environment. Is he too hot sleeping with his parents? Is it too cold? And all of that stuff. So a checklist, list all the items and then remove. And then I just want to say one thing about the meds, that cepraheptadine is a sleep, or it's not a sleep med. It's an appetite stimulant, and it can make you drowsy. So it seems weird that they give it to him at night and it doesn't make him drowsy. And then the other thing is melatonin that needs to be given before you, like a couple of hours before you want him to go to sleep. So just looking at all of those things that go together for that little guy.
Great suggestions. Fantastic. Kate, who is in your group?
Yeah, I can share some things. I actually was going to share exactly what Pat said about like checking in about medication, and then one thing at a time. Like, we're going to give lots of suggestions, but somebody in our group reminded us to just make one change at a time, which was really helpful. But since those already been taken, I'll say a different one. Janelle talked about the compression sheets. So a little different than the weighted blankets, but a compression sheet might offer still a little bit of movement, but still give kind of that helpful input as well. So anyway, that might be an option.
Great ideas and suggestions. Kirsten, your guys' group.
We didn't assign a spokesperson, so I'll just talk. We talked a bit about different aspects of the bedtime routine, and just kind of maybe regrouping on that a little bit. And then I think that one of the big things that came up was Katie had asked about reflux as being a possible contributor to insomnia and also to his aspiration pneumonia. So perhaps elevating the bed and just seeing if we can just make sure that he is really comfortable at night, that he's not having a physical issue there. And so I think that was one of the big things from our group.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you, guys. Remember to send your notes into Kate Bennington, and she's just dropped that into chat as well as into Early Echo at usu.edu. We compile those. They are on our Canvas page. So if you want to listen to or review all the great strategies that were suggested, you can always check those out. Kate and Shelby, we will email those to you after we compile them. Our next session is in August 2nd at noon, where we will be having another session on sleep. So don't forget to take your survey, and we'll hopefully see you guys all next month. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Every night I would have to